Showers, blustery showers in that keen breeze, but it will be chilly under those clear spells as well. Temperatures drop into single figures, but a milder night to come for much of England and Wales. So as we get started then on Sunday morning, most places will be off to a cloudy start. There'll be some further outbreaks of rain or drizzle across many northern and western parts, but some brightness, particularly across Scotland first thing and to the east of any high ground. But rain will turn heavier and more persistent through the afternoon. That sets the scene then for a very windy spell of weather across western Scotland through Sunday night into the early hours of Monday morning, with a warning already in force for that. I'll see you soon.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Alastair Stewart. Coming up on the show, as Boris Johnson faces fury and disbelief at Plan B and takes another pounding in the polls, is the issue of trust at the heart of all his problems. Salvation? It's the economy, stupid. Not if growth can't manage more than 0.1%. I'm joined by a master of political economy. And the latest from Theatreland. Awards not for the best actor or actress, but for the best performers in a male or female identifying role. And there you have it, all that coming up. But first, let's have a news update with Karen Roberts.
Thank you, Alistair. These are your latest headlines. The UK Health Security Agency says the Omicron variant is expected to be the dominant coronavirus strain by mid-December, with over 1 million cases if the current trend continues. Analysis showed that the first two vaccinations of AstraZeneca and Pfizer gave much lower protection against Omicron than other vaccines. However, the health agency said that initial data showed the booster jab provides around 70 to 75% protection against symptomatic infection. Only 3 visitors will be able to visit care home residents this winter. As part of the government's new care home guidance, each resident will also have one essential caregiver. The Department of Health and Social Care said the move was in order to balance the current COVID-19 risk with the need to keep people safe. Staff testing will also be increased from 2 lateral flow tests per week to 3, alongside a weekly PCR test. Sir Keir Starmer says Boris Johnson is not fit for office and trust is at an all-time low. He made the comments while meeting residents in Hadston in Northumberland. It follows an investigation into the refurbishment of the Prime Minister's flat in Downing Street and 3 alleged Christmas parties during lockdown last December. Number 10 has announced it's cancelled this year's event. The independent body responsible for handling complaints against the police is considering reopening the investigation into serial killer Stephen Port. An inquest found officers in East London missed opportunities to catch Port, and mistakes probably contributed to the murders of 4 young gay men. He's serving a whole life sentence that began in 2016. One of the victims' mothers says the deaths could have been avoided if the police hadn't made errors.
It is the fact that it was just basic policing that wasn't done in the very first place. Had that been done, the other 3 lads wouldn't have died. Plain and simple as that. If they'd have done the basics of policing and, you know, push Port more instead of just accepting everything he said, the other 3 lads would never have died.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is a step closer to being extradited from the UK following a win by the US government in the High Court. Judges overturned a previous ruling that he shouldn't be sent to the US because of a risk of suicide. He's wanted on allegations of a conspiracy to obtain and disclose national defence information after hundreds of thousands of leaked documents on the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq were published. His fiancée says they will appeal the decision. You are right, up to date. Now, back to Alistair.
Karen, thank you very much. I watched the Downing Street press conference on Wednesday with fascination. It was called to unveil Plan B for England amid the spectre of Omicron and the looming fears over the worst it might do in the coming days and weeks. The PM, Chief Scientific Officer to one side, Chief Medical Officer to the other, duly unveiled it. Masks are again a must in many settings. We should work from home again, if we can, from next week. Proof of having been jabbed and boosted or tested will be requirements for entry to or attendance at hostelries and some large gatherings. And we need to have a national conversation about the possibility of making vaccinations mandatory. The slides demonstrated the growth in cases, but there was little or no evidence of an Omicron-related surge in hospitalisations, serious illnesses, or even deaths yet. But there was lots on what might happen if we didn't adopt and adhere to Plan B. And there you have it. Next up came the questions. The national press and broadcasters launched in with question after question about parties. To be fair, they were political rather than medical or scientific correspondence, but it did seem curious. With the nation about to be put back into the little brother of lockdown, I'd have thought there would have been a fierce appetite for proof that we were facing a deadly threat and proof this package of measures would protect us from it. No doubt, had there been no parties and no flat refurbishments, that is what they would have done. On the plan measures, in truth, it is a better safe than sorry move, and we must trust the Prime Minister and his medical and scientific advisers. But therein lies the rub. We may still just about trust Vallance and Whitty, but there's growing evidence that many just don't trust the Prime Minister anymore. Here's where last year's parties come in, or gatherings, or parties that didn't happen, even though the invites went out weeks before and included outsiders as well as insiders. Ministers had plodded the there were no parties and if there were parties all rules were adhered to stuff for days. The guy who crafted that thin line of defence was, it seems, at one of the parties or gatherings that didn't happen, and even gave a speech and handed out awards. He offered his resignation today. Apparently it was refused. So the hacks wanted to know about parties. Had it been today, as I say, they would have wanted to know about flat refurbishments. Not who paid, but who asked for the dosh and when. The Prime Minister told his standards man that he didn't. There is now evidence good enough for the Electoral Commission to find the Tory party that he did, and that it was all a bit dodgy. There are serious allegations from serious sources that Plan B is just a distraction from Partygate and Flatgate and all the rest of the current gates. If it is reprehensible. If it isn't, and it is for real, then all of yesterday's questions should have been about the flimsy arguments for Plan B and the flimsy evidence that it will see off the Omicron threat. The real question has therefore become, why should we trust the Prime Minister? The polls are already suggesting a clear majority of you don't. Even some 20% of Tories don't, it seems. Labour are already inching ahead in the polls and now 8% clear, according to one poll published in just the last few hours. Now, we live in a democracy, and there are two key votes coming up next week, which will be key. MPs vote on Plan B on Tuesday, and on Thursday, the voters of North Shropshire choose who should replace Owen Paterson, the Tory MP who resigned over Lobbygate and Denialgate. The number of Tory MPs saying that they will vote against Plan B or abstain is in the double figures, quite high already, and some suggest it might even reach 100. It's also reported that quite a few of them have penned letters to the chairman of the 1922 committee suggesting another vote, a vote on the leadership of the Conservative Party. The Times leader talks of a trust deficit, the Telegraph a breach of trust with the British people. Whether it's recoverable or not, who knows? A victory on Tuesday with Labour support might help. A win, even with a sharply reduced majority in North Shropshire, would also help. Both are possible, but not yet bankers. Mr Johnson's greatest single strength is that his troops see him as a winner. Lose that, and all is lost. The Tories aren't sentimental in these matters. Quotes, "The party is littered with ruthlessness on these questions," says former Cabinet Minister Andrew Mitchell, who believes the PM will, however, get a grip and will probably survive. So does Fraser Nelson, editor of The Spectator and a Times columnist. But he suggests there will be a price to pay, with the Cabinet taking more of a grip and reining him in. Many also feel that he needs to shed more of the bright young things around him, the young masters and mistresses of the universe who thought they could do no wrong and were immune to the tedium of political accountability. Others point out there is no obvious Tory challenger around whom a majority of the party could easily rally. And some even suggest the sharpest criticisms come from old foes like Dominic Cummings, settling scores, as well as old-school Tories who find it difficult to forgive Mr Johnson for his high tax and high spending drift. As James Forsyth observes, they smell blood. Labour, though, doing better in the polls on voting preference, remain a work in progress as far as readiness and indeed fitness for government are concerned. Now, the Prime Minister may take paternity leave to reflect on all of this, but on paternity leave or in office, he has one central question to answer. How do I win back the trust of the people, my party, and not a few of my closest colleagues? Because, Prime Minister, as it stands, not a lot of them do. And I'm delighted to say that to discuss this with me, I'm joined now by Lord Gavin Barwell, who was Theresa May's Chief of Staff. Gavin, really great to see you. Do you agree that the Prime Minister is potentially cornered by this key issue of trust?
Yes, I think the combination of that and extreme frustration among his MPs that on the Owen Paterson affair, on parties in Downing Street and on the redecoration of his flat, these are self-inflicted wounds. You know, sometimes political parties, like on COVID restrictions, have divisions, but they're about serious and complicated issues of public policy. And I think over the last few weeks, his MPs have been taking a lot of flack from their constituents about things that are entirely self-inflicted.
For him, you sat there, and I said almost a throwaway line in the introduction, you sat there alongside Theresa May, loyally as she was pounded for nothing has changed and the rest of it. And eventually there was no escape route for her. Do you think there is one for Boris Johnson?
I think it's possible, but I think it will depend on two things. First, he's going to have to change his ways, change the style of the government that he leads, because if he keeps on making these unforced errors, his MPs are going to ultimately lose patience with him. But secondly, I think something you said in your introduction there was spot on, which is the Tory party isn't sentimental. And more than probably any previous leader, he depends for his position on the perception that he is an asset when it comes to winning elections. And if the polls stay in the way that they have been over the last 24, 48 hours for a prolonged period, then that judgment will change among his MPs, and you will see a change in leader.
Yeah. I mean, some senior figures are saying he's got until the new year.
So I doubt the timescale is that short. I mean, we'll have to see. It depends if more revelations come out. We'll have to see what comes out of the Cabinet Secretary's report, and we'll have to see what Lord Geidt does in relation to the issues in relation to the flat that you were just talking about. But what I think you can say is that this feels like an inflection point. It's got to be the worst week that he's had during his time in Number 10. And it really depends on whether the switch in the polls we've seen, both the party voting intentions, which you just showed on your graphic, but also the quite significant percentage of the public that are saying at the moment that he should resign as Prime Minister. If those stick for a period of several months, then I think the situation becomes much more difficult.
Yeah. I tell you what I think, Gavin, as well, would be utterly explosive, would be any evidence that Plan B was nothing more than a diversion from all of those other problems, parties, refurbishments, allegations of giving false evidence. If the threat from Omicron is as bad as the medics say it is, then the edicts get ignored because people don't trust him anymore. That could be literally fatal.
Yeah, so I think that there's two issues, as you say. That if anyone ever were able to demonstrate that the timing of this was purely for tactical reasons, that would be extremely serious, as you say. Actually, my biggest concern about what's happened this week is that personally, I think they've made the right judgment on Omicron. But exactly as you say, the Prime Minister's authority, his ability to convince people to do what he's asking, has been very seriously damaged by the parties. And the danger is that if people don't listen to what they're being asked to do, and the situation does get as bad as the scientists fear, then we've got even worse restrictions coming our way down the line.
We're agreed 100% on that, Gavin, and thank you for so doing. And I didn't interrupt. Safe to say Lord Geidt, who you mentioned in passing there, is, of course, the senior gentleman, ex-Buckingham Palace, who is the officer commanding standards, to whom it is alleged the Prime Minister didn't tell the whole and undiluted truth. Thanks. I want to change tack slightly for the last few minutes that we've got, Gavin, if I may. One of his other problems, and you will be very familiar with this because it's DNA Tory stuff, other members of the party at the moment just don't think that he's a Tory anymore. High tax, high spending, net zero growth, and an authoritarian.
So I think that the tax and spend issue is a really difficult one for the government. So first of all, we need to understand why is tax and spending high. So it's partly the pandemic. You know, the government is having to spend more at the moment to deal with that. And it did some permanent damage to our economy, opened up what economists would call a structural deficit, and the Chancellor had to plug that. But it's partly because this is a different kind of Conservative Party today than the Conservative Party of David Cameron or certainly of John Major or Margaret Thatcher. The voter coalition that is sustaining this Conservative government is a different one to the traditional Conservative one. When I first got involved in politics in the 1990s, socioeconomic class was a very strong predictor of how people voted. And it's not now. So there's the Tory party's got less middle class Southern support. It's got more support from working class voters in the Midlands and the North. And that is going to have some impact on its policies. So traditional Tories don't like it. They want to go back to the sort of low tax, small state Thatcherite approach. But that isn't going to work for the electoral coalition that the Conservative Party now has. Now, look, I think Rishi Sunak is under real pressure to find some way to reduce the tax burden by the next election. But he's not going to do that by cutting spending. So the answer has to be to find ways to get our economy to grow more strongly, to get a sort of growth agenda that grows the overall size of the cake so that a smaller proportion of the cake needs to be taken by the government in terms of public work.
Yeah. You mentioned Rishi, and I'll add another, and that's Liz Truss, to my final question, and that is that I love the expression X is on manoeuvres, i.e. a senior figure is vying up another position, and in this case, if, and I'm very conscious of your very crisp and authoritative, I should say, analysis earlier on, if a vacancy were to emerge, Is there a challenger, be it Rishi Sunak or be it Liz Truss, literally on manoeuvres in a tank the other day, fantastic imagery, around whom they could all unite? I mean, you and I will remember those funny days where someone like John Major comes through the middle as the unpredicted one because they couldn't agree on A and they couldn't agree on B, and suddenly somebody is conjured up from nowhere. Is there a challenger they could unite behind?
So, I mean, I think it's really important to note that the rules have changed. So it doesn't work how it used to work. You used to have someone challenge the leader of the party. That's not the case anymore. You now have a vote of confidence in the leader if enough MPs send in a letter to Graham Brady. And if the leader loses that vote of confidence, they're finished. And then you have an election to choose a successor. But if you're asking me, who would the runners or riders be in any leadership election? My guess would be there's at least 4 potential candidates I can think of, which would be the 2 people you've mentioned, Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, Liz Truss, Foreign Secretary, Saj Javid, the Health Secretary, and then possibly, I think, Jeremy Hunt, who obviously came second to Boris Johnson in the last leadership election, and for some reason that very few people can understand, hasn't been brought back into government since.
Fascinating, yeah, and has made a big footprint throughout the COVID in his role as chair of that select committee. The final question, and you can draw everything together that you just said there at the end about runners and riders and what have you. In terms of the starter moving towards his or her position with the flag and what have you, how important is North Shropshire in that by-election on Thursday next?
So I think I don't think it's decisive, but it's clearly significant. I mean, the party number 10 will argue, well, this was a very difficult by-election because of the circumstances behind it. So you would probably expect to see a result that wasn't as good as the one that they achieved in Bexley the other day. But the Prime Minister has had the worst run during the course of this week in terms of the news agenda that he's had during his time in number 10. Losing a by-election would not help. And as I said, we've also got Cabinet Secretary's report and we've got Lord Geit's reaction to the Electoral Commission report in terms of the refurbishment of the flat. So there's a number of things in the pipeline that can make this situation even worse for the Prime Minister than it already is.
Gavin, great to see you. Thanks for breaking into your Friday evening to come and talk to us. I know you've had a busy day already. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. Thanks.
Pleasure.
That's Lord Barwell, Gavin Barwell, former Member of Parliament and in his own right, and former Chief of Staff to Theresa May at number 10 Downing Street with his thoughts on the Boris Johnson situation. Now, if there's one thing that normally lifts spirits among politicians, and indeed the population at large, it is, of course, good news on the economic front. Well, I'm afraid the UK economy grew by just 0.1% in October. The health sector, including GP visits, ironically, did rather well, as did the sale of second-hand cars. But construction ground to a halt. We also ate out less, and all of that before Omicron swept down upon us. Now, forecasters are already saying that Plan B, with more people working from home and the further hit on hospitality, things are likely to get worse before they get better. And worse than 0.1% is painfully close to stagnation. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, said, and I quote, he'd always acknowledged that there could be bumps on our road to recovery and claimed we have still been recovering quicker than expected, with more employees on payrolls than ever before and redundancies remaining low. That said, it does look very optimistic to think that growth in 2021 too will hit the 6.5% level predicted in his autumn budget and spending review. So tricky times, and I'm delighted now to be joined by Hamish McRae, principal economic commentator with The Independent. Hamish, I always describe you, as you know, as a political economist because you marry the two estates so well together. It wasn't much growth in October, but it's even lower than folk had predicted. How worrying is it?
I think you always have to be careful when stats come out, whether they're really right. We can think back to lots of times. Oh, gosh, in the I think it was 2015 when they thought there was a triple dip. Then all the figures were just changed, and actually there was no second dip, no third dip, nothing at all. So I think when these figures come out on a monthly basis, just be cautious. If they are what you'd think, if they're intuitively right, then they probably are right. If they're intuitively wrong, well, they're probably wrong. So I think in this instance, sure, there probably was a rather disappointing October. Construction sector, small sector, but they couldn't get the stuff to build things with. So manufacturing didn't do well. It will come up in November, and then I think we really need to be seriously worried about what's happening this month. All these Christmas parties being cancelled. This means I think we're going to have a nasty December. Quarter on quarter, maybe a bit of growth, maybe not much. But then, that if people have more money, then January, February, March will be better. So I think it's disappointing. It's not a catastrophe.
OK, a very good cautionary note there at the beginning of it. Gavin Barwell, I don't know if you were able to hear it whilst you were waiting for our conversation, but Gavin Barwell, who I know you know, Theresa May's former chief of staff, was saying that Rishi Sunak needs to do something on the economy and he will want to do something on tax, not just for economic reasons, but for Tory brand reasons. Do you agree with that? Is that the right thing to try and do, either for the economy or for Rishi Sunak's prospects if there's any leadership challenge coming up?
I don't know whether he can get the timing of this exactly right. I mean, the issue is he can't do much this year. You've just got to get more revenue coming in. Revenue isn't bad, by the way, not bad at all. One of the good, the deficits are coming in lower than expected, partly, to a large extent, actually, because revenue isn't bad. And if revenue isn't bad, that says the economy is doing rather better. VAT up, national insurance up, and so on. So, yeah. But he's got to wait for that to come in.
Can I just butt in? Let me just butt in for a terribly brief moment and then get back to your theme. Because it's a crucial point, but just to make it clear to folk, when you say revenue is up, that means we are still paying good chunks of tax, and companies are paying good chunks of tax and VAT. Because as Rishi said in that comment, employment is very, very high and redundancies are very, very low.
Well, he's right. And for some reason that we don't fully understand, there are enormous numbers of jobs around. A lot of them are unfilled. But despite the fact they can't fill them, maybe they're just paying people more. You've got really good numbers on VAT and really good numbers on national insurance.
And when you said about the timing, again, a political economist, not just an econometrician, if Rishi gets the timing wrong, then it's Boris Johnson that reaps the benefits rather than Rishi Sunak, are you suggesting?
I think that you can't predict these things at all. I mean, what you can say is that the government's finances are getting better. And once they secure they're getting better and the numbers are not as bad as the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, thought, then you've got a bit of scope to feed some of the money back in. And I think that was always his tactic. Take the money away now in the first 2 years of the Parliament, start feeding it back in year 3, whack it in year 4. So I think that was the game plan. Now, how this fits in with this little local difficulty that the Prime Minister has over parties, I can't answer that. I really, really don't know.
You can answer this, though. Is James Carville, that brilliant American advisor who helped Bill Clinton not to 1 but to 2 presidencies, still right? And I quote, and you know what the quote is going to be because you've heard it so many times before, "It's the economy, stupid. Get that right, and whatever it looks like, however bad it seems, you'll be okay."
Exactly, but no chancellor, no government has a magic wand that can just, turn up the taps at just the right time. There are too many other things going on. So, yes, it is the economy, stupid. Yes, there is a decent growth phase going on right now. But, I would not want to be a political strategist making a bet on whether the economy will be performing strongly in 3 years' time, 2 years' time. You can't call that.
Well, if you can't, no one can. Hamish, it's always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for your time this Friday evening, and I hope you have a lovely weekend. Best to all of you. Bye-bye now. That's Hamish McRae, someone I've known and admired for a very long time, who writes eloquently about politics and economics and that magic collision between the two of them for the Independent newspaper. Always well worth popping in to see what he's got to say. After the break, we'll be looking at how the pandemic is still affecting schools. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, most areas enjoyed a bright but cold day on Friday, but all changed through this weekend as it turns milder, but we'll see some rain at times as well and turning very windy across the far northwest on Sunday evening. So if we look at the pressure pattern then, you can see a bit of a ridge of high pressure across the UK on Friday. That was what's brought those bright conditions, but this weather front is spreading its way in from the Atlantic, and that's what brings some rain across all areas through Saturday. So back to Friday evening and overnight, then a lot of places will be dry, some clear spells as well. A few showers across western parts of England and Wales, tending to fade through the night. One or two mist and fog patches in the east as well. But cloud will thicken in the west as we see rain spreading in across western Scotland and Northern Ireland through the night. Some of that could be quite heavy. Turning milder as that cloud spreads in from the west, but another cold night to come further towards the east. So it's a bright start to the day across the east, quite cold as I said, but cloud will thicken through the morning here as we see rain spreading in across the whole of Scotland, Northern England, Northern Ireland, parts of Wales as well, and some of that rain could be quite heavy as well, so quite a wet picture through the afternoon. The rain lighter and more patchier across southern parts and not reaching the far southeast until later on in the day. Across the east it will be chilly once again, but further towards the west those temperatures will be higher than recent days with top temperatures of 10 to 12 degrees. A wet spell of weather then across southeastern areas through Saturday evening and overnight, and for much of the night across England and Wales it will be cloudy, further outbreaks of rain, that rain heavy for a time across northwest England, parts of Wales as well. A different picture though across much of Scotland. Here it will be drier, a few showers, blustery showers in that keen breeze, but it will be chilly under those clear spells as well. Temperatures drop into single figures, but a milder night to come for much of England and Wales. So as we get started then on Sunday morning, most places will be off to a cloudy start. There'll be some further outbreaks of rain or drizzle across many northern and western parts, but some brightness, particularly across Scotland first thing and to the east of any high ground. But rain will turn heavier and more persistent through the afternoon. That sets the scene then for a very windy spell of weather across western Scotland through Sunday night into the early hours of Monday morning, with a warning already in force for that. I'll see you soon.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. For some school children, Christmas has come early. Across the country, entire year groups are being sent home early as a result of positive COVID tests. Now, the Schools Minister, Nadhim Zahawi, told the Daily Telegraph that school attendance remains mandatory, but nevertheless, lots of children will now be off until January. Although adults in England have been told to work from home if they can, the government doesn't want schools to be disrupted, even though many teachers are currently isolating. Let's get the view of a head teacher from the chalk face, as it were. Christine Cunliffe is the principal of LVS Ascot, which teaches children between the ages of 4 and 18. Great to see you, and thank you for joining us. Nadhim Zahawi says attendance remains mandatory, but that's clearly not what is happening. What's it look like from where you stand?
Well, I think different schools are having different experiences, but, I do agree that children should be in school where possible. I mean, I do know that some schools in our area are having a real problem, and that's, with infections or children having to remain off until they get a PCR test, and also affecting staffing as well. So it's very different wherever you are in the country. We had quite an outbreak probably about October half term with year 5 and year 6. But, since then it's really kind of died down, and touch wood, we've been quite lucky. But as I say, other schools in our area, there's lots of children out of school at the moment.
I also gather from a very good source that schools are getting messages from the Department for Education saying they should prepare for a return to online learning.
Well, I think what we've learned over the last 18 months is we just don't know what's going to happen. And especially in the last week or so with the new variant, I think we've just got to be prepared for anything. But I think, we've been here before, we've done it before, we've got the devices, the online learning. So it should be quite a smooth transition, whatever happens.
We were talking in the first half of the programme, Christine, about Boris Johnson's ups and downs and what have you, and difficulties that he may be having. But he has said that he thinks nativity plays should go ahead. Is that what's going to be happening in your school and the schools run by friends of yours?
Yeah, absolutely. They have to go ahead. We've already had ours, and it was brilliant. These are the things that children will remember for the rest of their lives. It's very important. It's part of their education. It's part of what we do as schools. It's part of our life. So they've got to go ahead.
That's an intriguing attitude, because I think you speak for all sorts of people across all walks of life. And that is the strength of the just get on with it. And what worried me was when Plan B was announced, nobody was quite sure if they really meant it or whether they were just issuing Plan B as a kind of cover-up for other problems that they had. I mean, do you basically get up each morning, take a deep breath and say, onward and upward?
Yeah, I think we've just got to keep going. I was a little surprised the other day, and yes, I think that went through my mind and a lot of other people. Diverting away from other issues. I mean, we were all used to wearing masks and being careful and protecting ourselves and other people. So it's not really different. So let's just see what happens in the next couple of weeks. That could be a telling time.
And the other thing is you sort of approach that halfway point in the academic year, or getting close to the halfway point, and we're approaching 2 years into this COVID-related disruption. How troubled are you about the long-term well-being problems of these little people? And I said in the introduction, you start at 4 and take them all the way through, but even 4 and 5-year-olds can get freaked out by not being where they should be and not doing what they should be doing and not doing what they expect to be able to do.
Yeah, and this is why they need to be in school. And I think we're all, head teachers across the country are seeing the effects of the children being out of school a lot over the last 18 months. I mean, when the first lockdown started in March 2020, if you take, for example, a child in year 8, they're in year 10 now. So they've gone from being quite a young person to a young adult with all that brings. And yet they've not been in school with a normal socialisation and transition into that young adult life. And I think we're seeing things like that. And further down the school, social aspects, being able to tie the shoelaces and button up and get ready for PE lessons. We have to be back in school because I think we really are starting to see the effects of the lockdowns now.
Yeah. The final question, Christine, and I do a programme at the weekend, and I think that you're aware of that. And we've talked a lot about catch-up and Sir Kevin Collins's plan and what Robert Halfon wants done. We're now getting to that point. OK, fine, it's going to be January within 2 or 3 weeks' time, and catch-up whatever age group it is crucial for these young people. How confident are you that there will be a scheme in place that means we can gather them up, bundle them up and get them back to roughly where they should have been?
Well, I think everybody's committed. I think the teaching profession and the head teachers across this country are committed to getting the children where they should be. And I think all of us, as you say, they get up every morning, go, take a deep breath and go, come on, let's do this. We can nail it.
Absolutely. Roll up your sleeves, get stuck in, and that's mums and dads as well as teachers.
Oh, yeah, it's a joint partnership, and that's something we've got to remember because we're all in it together. And it's not just down to schools to educate their children, it's a partnership.
Great to talk to you, Christine Cunliffe there. Thank you very much indeed. And I would have said enjoy the nativity, but I hope you greatly enjoyed it and that you do enjoy the end of term. Christine Cunliffe there ahead from Ascot. Great to talk to her and to hear that optimism. Roll up your sleeves, get stuck in there. You know, it'll be all right. Now, here's another story, however, that affects school children. As that Omicron variant continues to spread across the United Kingdom, fresh numbers out this evening, a lot of infections, but still not terrible news on people being hospitalised or, God forbid, even dying. That is not the case yet. But one of the country's leading epidemiologists, what am I talking about? I'll try it again. Leading epidemiologist has called for 5 to 11-year-olds to be vaccinated as soon as possible. Professor John Edmonds, who's a member of the SAGE advisory group, says the recent rise in positive cases is mainly being driven by children. At the moment, you have to be at least 12 years old to be eligible for a COVID jab in the UK. So, is it time for primary school children to be vaccinated? Joining me to discuss this now is Dr. Ros Jones. Ros is a retired consultant paediatrician and a member of the Health Advisory and Recovery Team. Simple question, what's your view, right or wrong?
Absolutely wrong. I think on the basis that we have got very poor data for 5 to 11-year-olds. The Pfizer trials are small. They said in their own report that they were too small to look for side effects, and they are planning to do studies which will be published in 2025 regarding the risk of myocarditis. Now, children in this primary age group, their risk from COVID is negligible. So the idea that we should be recommending a vaccine with no long-term safety data to protect adults is just unethical. I know that Professor Edmonds, he's an epidemiologist, he's not a doctor, so he's presumably not had to study medical ethics or first do no harm, and maybe that gives him a different perspective. But as a paediatrician, I cannot imagine subjecting children to this type of vaccine unless it was for a disease that they were at risk. And then that's quite different. Then you're prepared to weigh up balance of risk of side effects against the risk of a disease. But if you have a disease where the risk is minute, then the risk of side effects is unacceptable.
Is that clash that you just so eloquently described between, as it were, the academic theoreticians, the epidemiologists, and the frontline practicing, I mean, GPs or even consultants, given your level where you are, where you got to, is that clash quite common? That the boffins will say one thing, but people on the ground will say, hang on a minute, that's just wrong.
Yes, I think so. I think, to my mind, having spent my entire career in and out of the children's ward looking after snotty kids and helping their parents through thick and thin, you have a very different relationship with your balance of harm and how you discuss things, how you get informed consent. We're not getting informed consent for this. We've been just treating it as a single one-size-fits-all, the vaccines are safe and effective. And it has to be relative. Safety is relative to risk. And if you're at low risk of disease, then even a moderate risk of a side effect outweighs the risk of the disease, then it's a non-starter to be vaccinating.
We talked at the top of the
program. The other thing I would say also is he's not an immunologist either. And immunologists are very concerned that one of the things about, particularly for young children, when they meet an infection for the first time, that is part of training their immune system for life. Yeah. So when they meet coronavirus, they will mount a really broad immune response, including T cells, upper airway antibodies, IgA, all sorts of things that are not involved in vaccination at all. Now, if you're vaccinated and you then meet COVID, you don't mount that normal response. You're just busy making spike antibodies to the spike protein because that's what the vaccines taught you to do. And that is then your memory. Whereas these children, they need to get their own natural immunity sorted, and that would give a much broader protection to the adult population than getting children somehow into this roller coaster of boosters, which we seem to be expecting adults now to be having boosters every, 3 months? Is it going to be 2 next? Who knows?
So you've got the immunologists, who are the people who are experts on how not to get it and how to be protected against it, and the epidemiologists, who are the people who are the experts in how it spreads if you can't stop it. Are there enough just frontline doctors on SAGE?
No, there aren't. I think that's been one of the real problems. There are not jobbing physicians, paediatricians, general practitioners there who are seeing patients. And there haven't been immunologists either. There have been a glut of mathematicians and modelers, and they have a very different perspective. And I think the other thing which has been a problem, again, from an ethical point of view, I was very interested in everything the head teacher said, the importance of making life normal for children. The fear-mongering that's gone on for the last 2 years has a profound effect on children's mental well-being. And that is not good for your immune system either. Getting out and about, fresh air, exercise, all of this has been put to one side. And we have spent 2 years concentrating on daily death tolls from one disease, not in context at all.
I can remember vaguely, going back to my childhood, the idea of eating an occasional fistful of mud was deemed not such a bad thing because that would protect one against various things. And I have an older brother, and if one of us got something like, chicken pox or something, then Mum would put us together in the same bed until we both got it, and then we'd have our immunology. Old wives' tale or good medicine practiced by a lady who has sadly long since left us?
Good medicine practiced by a wise lady, I would say. I mean, there was good evidence, for example, that teaching was a low-risk profession. There was a lot of angst last year with some of the teachers' unions pushing for teachers not to go back to school and to do it all online. But actually, they had a reduced risk from COVID. And there was a good study from Scotland for health workers. If you had primary school-aged children at home, you had a lower risk of COVID, getting seriously ill with it, presumably because all these snotty kids, they bring home common cold virus infections all the time, and they top up their household adult family, which is good. As a paediatrician, I spent decades not getting ill, despite spending day in, day out looking after kids with every infection under the sun.
Did you get jabbed up and boosted yourself?
For coronavirus?
Yeah.
Asking me that? Well, now that's a very interesting question, because I think I would not want to say publicly whether I were vaccinated or not. As a paediatrician, I would hate me saying I was vaccinated, give parents a false sense of security that meant it was a good thing. On the other hand, if I say that I'm not vaccinated, then will I just get rubbished as anti-vax and not asked again? It's a personal choice, isn't it? It should not be a matter of public discussion at all. Whatever Andrew Neil may think about this, it is not, this is a private choice that you make.
So that's a fascinating response, and I completely respect it. But forget Andrew for a moment, but the Prime Minister himself said we may need to have a national conversation about whether being jabbed is mandatory. It is already for care workers. It will be for NHS workers come April of next year. We need to have that conversation. Intriguing to hear you, as a consultant paediatrician, to say that the first response you'd give to the Prime Minister would be mind your own business.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is completely irrelevant to reducing the risk from this pandemic. The vilification of the unvaccinated, we know perfectly well, we all know people who are doubly vaccinated and who've caught this from other people who are doubly vaccinated. The vaccines, the manufacturers, in fairness, never said that it would prevent infection and transmission. All they've said is it'll reduce your risk of serious disease and death. And if you are at risk of serious disease and death, then it's a reasonable choice. But if you're young and healthy, it's a very reasonable choice not to be vaccinated. And you are not putting other people at risk by not being vaccinated. It's just nonsensical. Most of the people who've chosen not to be vaccinated have probably already had COVID, and they've got good, long-lasting immunity. And I don't know what possible benefit there is. All the countries who've introduced vaccine passports have still got loads of cases, haven't they? They're not exactly a success story in France or Italy or wherever. And the idea that Austria is about to say that you would go to prison if you choose not to have a drug which is still in the trial phase. It's not even licensed this yet. There is no long-term safety data. And as a paediatrician, I would never have prescribed a drug to somebody without reading the long-term safety data, unless I had a child at death's door, in which case I would be discussing with the parents on a one-to-one basis whether they wanted this treatment. Let's throw anything at it because your child, is seriously ill. But not for a condition that has such an extremely low case fatality rate. Not at all.
Which is why I suggested at the top of the programme I would have loved to have heard a lot more questions at that press conference on Wednesday about what is the danger, what is the risk, what is the efficacy, etc., etc., etc. But it was all about parties and it was all about cover-up. There we are.
But they can't tell us what the risk is.
Finally and briefly, pro Plan B or petrified by it?
Oh, I personally feel like just saying, rather like your head teacher, I think we should just all go back to normal and ignore the whole thing.
All right, Ros Jones.
We've got to get on with life and the economy and meeting our family. If Boris tries to cancel Christmas this year, I think he's going to be in major trouble. I think most people will just say, tough bananas, we're having Christmas regardless.
I think that is a mild way of putting it, Ros, to what some people may say in the language that they select to use. Former consultant paediatrician Ros Jones, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Have a great weekend. After the break, find out why there won't be a Best Actor or a Best Actress at next month's What's on Stage Awards. Stay with us.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
The nominees for the What's on Stage Awards were announced yesterday. It's the 22nd year of the event, but this time there will be a big difference. They have replaced Best Actor and Actress categories with, and I quote, performer in a male or female identifying role. The decision comes just a few months after one of the nominees, Emma Corrin, revealed that she is queer, her word, and non-binary, also her expression. Corrin is up for Best Performer in a female identifying role in a play award, alongside others including Lily Allen and Gemma Arterton. Now, it's not the first time that this sort of thing has happened. Less than 3 weeks ago, the organisers of the Brits announced that they were scrapping their female and male awards in those great prestigious music gongs and replacing them instead with a single prize for Best British Artist. For more on this, I'm delighted to be joined by my dear friend Brendan O'Neill from Spiked. I got a problem with this because I think I like the Brits' idea of just doing away with it, but this one seems to me, it took me nearly 18 seconds to announce the title of the award, let alone what gender it goes to. What's your view?
I think it's pretty shocking, actually, and particularly if it's true that this was partially done because Emma Corrin now identifies as they and them, I think, non-binary. She uses plural pronouns. And obviously there's the singer Sam Smith, who now identifies as they and them as well. And apparently that's one of the reasons the Brit Awards changed their categories too. I find it very worrying because it looks to me like another part of the culture war against biological sex and this attempt to erase the categories of men and women, the words mother and father, the kind of ideas that we've had in the human race since we've existed. Sure. And so I'm very worried about the erasure that's taking place of biological reality.
Let me butt in. I mean, we talked about that, the one about midwives and people who give birth and the rest of it. Park that over there just for a moment, if you'd be so kind, because I think we agree on that. And that, to me, is a complete and utter nonsense. But in journalism, our trade, I cannot remember there having been a Best Female Journalist Award or a Best Male. You're either the best reporter, the best newscaster, the best foreign correspondent, whether you are male or female. So I would suggest to you that this is progress at the Brits, but bonkers at the What's on Stage.
The Brits thing is slightly different because what they're doing is throwing together all sexes. So it will be a gender-neutral award. The best singer or the best entertainer, it won't matter if you're male or female. There's an argument to be made that that is a form of progress, although some feminists have pointed out that men tend to win these awards more often. So the Grammys, I think, went gender-neutral for some of their award categories, and men tended to win more than women for some reason. So there's a concern there. But you're right. There is a difference between what the Brits have done and what the What's on Stage awards have done, because what they're doing is really genuinely quite bonkers. And it really speaks to the confusions of our time, because this whole idea of a female identifying person, for example, that could be anyone. That could be a man or a woman. Anyone who feels like a woman or declares him or herself to be a woman is instantly a woman in the current climate. So instantly, traditionally the award for Best Actress is now open to someone of any sex. So that's a real problem, and I think it will really undermine women's acting and be a blow, I think, to female actors.
The final point is they do claim that it was in response to the membership of this organisation. So they're kind of claiming democracy rather than diktat.
Well, who knows? I mean, it would be a rather eccentric bunch of people that would agree to such a bizarre transformation in the naming of an award given out to actors and actresses. The thing that concerns me most is that I think women lose out a lot as a result of the cult of transgenderism or the cult of gender fluidity. We've already seen that born males are taking part in women's sports and sometimes beating women. Now we have a situation where born males could potentially be up for what used to be the Best Actress award. So all the way in this situation, men, let's call them men, are elbowing women aside. So that's definitely not progress. And I think women should have... All right,
Brendan, I'm going to have to elbow you aside because we've run out of time. But thank you for those profound thoughts, as always. I'll see you again very, very soon. Brendan O'Neill, Spiked. That is it for tonight. I'm delighted to say that I will be back at midday tomorrow. Next up tonight here on GB News, Mark Nolan.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello. Most areas enjoyed a bright but cold day on Friday, but all changed through this weekend as it turns milder, but we'll see some rain at times as well and turning very windy across the far northwest on Sunday evening. So if we look at the pressure pattern, then you can see a bit of a ridge of high pressure across the UK on Friday. That was what's brought those bright conditions, but this weather front is spreading its way in from the Atlantic, and that's what brings some rain across all areas through Saturday. So back to Friday evening and overnight, then a lot of places will be dry, some clear spells as well. A few showers across western parts of England and Wales, tending to fade through the night. One or two mist and fog patches in the east as well. But cloud will thicken in the west as we see rain spreading in across western Scotland and Northern Ireland through the night. Some of that could be quite heavy. Turning milder as that cloud spreads in from the west, but another cold night to come further towards the east. So it's a bright start to the day across the east, quite cold as I said, but cloud will thicken through the morning here as we see rain spreading in